I I have no audio. One of us has no audio. Let me see. Oh no, I can't hear you at all. I think.
How
Yeah, I
about
don't
now?
think. Oh, perfect.
Okay, cool.
Yes,
Yeah, I forgot I had to actually turn on my fancy mic.
it sounds great.
Hello, how are you? How was your fundraising AI day?
It was great. Really great.
Yeah, good. No, it's like so intense. It's like that was
Yeah.
a action-packed day.
Oh, there was so much going on. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Excellent. Are you in the Bay? Did you make it to the after party?
Yeah, I'm here. I leave today, actually.
Oh, how fun. How was the party? I was sad to miss it.
Yeah, it was nice. Really nice.
Good, good, good. Um, Someone else is joining us, yeah?
Yeah, I think Justin, isn't he?
I think Justin is not, he said Stephanie?
Oh, sure. Stephanie is.
I don't know who Stephanie is, so we'll get to that.
Yeah,
I
Stephanie's one of the key people who work on the field guide.
got it, got it, got it. And did you get the interview questions? Did Justin
Yep,
pass the? Okay, cool.
all looks good.
All right, let's talk about publication because
Yes.
I'm imagining you want this to be put out prior to Giving Tuesday.
I mean, ideally, but I think because we're going to talk about end of year fundraising and stuff, that it's probably most relevant that way.
Yeah. Why don't we do this? I I got something for the 7th. I could put you October 14th, which
Okay, great.
does that work? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
All right, cool. Let's do that. Um, yeah. So we'll record and then I'm just gonna need you and Stephanie to send me headshots of both of you so we can use them for our social media assets.
Okay, great. And this is no video or is also video?
Oh, it's also video. So I'll take
Okay.
snippets and I'll use it for social and then I actually just post the whole interview on YouTube. I've been like trying to figure out how to up my content game.
Nice.
We're
Good
we're
for you.
all in the feeding the content beast.
Hmm.
All right, let me make sure that I have my notes here. And Woodrow, how would you like me to introduce you?
You can just introduce me as Giving Tuesday's Chief Data Officer.
Okay, great. You're also running your own consulting firm?
Yes. I'm actually seconded from the firm to Giving Tuesday, so I work for Giving
Oh,
Tuesday on a full-time basis, seconded from the firm.
got it.
I'm on permanent loan.
Permanent loan. I love it. Okay. And I don't know Stephanie. What's her?
So her title is uh, Executive Vice President, Strategy and Decision Science. Um, I'll and I mean, she's great, and she's essentially one of the authors, the sort of lead author of the field guide.
Got it. Hey, Stephanie.
Morning, everybody.
Oh,
How are
hi,
you?
Stephanie. Hi, I was just talking about you.
I wondered. It's good to meet you, Ray. Good to see you again, Woodrow. Is my
Likewise.
audio okay? Because I'm on the road and I realized I don't have my typical speaker.
Yeah, yeah, you are looking good. Okay,
I'm in the
so
same boat.
Stephanie, I don't know if you got the questions I sent in advance.
No, but I'm a
Nope.
pretty good winger.
Okay, here, let me just put it in the chat for you.
Okay, perfect.
I sent them kind of late uh to Justin
Oh,
yesterday
oh,
afternoon.
Okay, yeah, and I apologize. I was in an all-day meeting yesterday, so he may well have passed them along and I missed it.
No worries, but I'm sure we can. Oh, JK does not like. Okay. Uh, okay. All right. And so, Stephanie, this is just, it's super casual, very conversational, but there are two of you here. So, um, I'm not always sure which person is better equipped to answer the question. So if you like just want to jump in and be like, okay, I'll take this one. The other thing to know is I do edit. So if at any point you're like, let me like restate that, or we end up bumping into each other or whatever, that's okay. We can handle it in post, as they say.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, hold on. Let me okay, hold on. I have to cut and paste a lot of these because it doesn't like all of the content. Okay. Are you all ready?
Ready to go.
All right, let's do it. Hey, podcast listeners, Rhea Wong with you once again with Nonprofit Lowdown. Today, we're going to talk about a hot topic that I know everyone is thinking about, Giving Tuesday. It is Q4, the fundraising Super Bowl. Today, my guest is Woodrow Rosenbaum, let me start that again. Today, my guest is Woodrow, blah, blah, blah. Today, my guests are Woodrow Rosenbaum, Giving Tuesday's Chief Data Officer, and Stephanie Russell, the Executive Vice President, Head of Strategy and Decision Sciences of RKD Group. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Rhea.
Okay, so today we are talking about the Field Guide and GivingPulse Report. So let's just jump right into it. Can one of you tell me what is this report and why should I care?
Huh. So I can cover that. Giving Pulse is something that we started in the Giving Tuesday Data Commons to get a much deeper understanding of all of the ways people bring generosity to make change. So we recognize that there is a need for a deeper understanding of these behaviors. If we're going to engage people in nonprofit fundraising, we need to understand what they care about, what they're doing, why they're doing it. So Giving Pulse is a survey that runs every week. We ask people about their previous week's giving behavior, their attitudes, their values, their awareness and concern about crisis and issues in the world. We look at how they're giving their money, their time, their advocacy stuff. We compare the different mechanisms that they use, giving directly to individuals, giving to nonprofits, giving through mutual aid. And this gives us a really deep and really up-to-date look, very high fidelity, very recent trends in those behaviors and drivers of the action that we want to see.
Yeah. And then just to build on that, then the RKD group, with our partnership with Giving Tuesday, we're looking at a lot of those trends and the nuggets that we see in the data that we think are really impactful, and can help fuel fundraising decisions and allow nonprofits to build better strategies to even further increase generosity.
That's a really good point. So, Stephanie, could you give us high level a couple of the nuggets that you think are most relevant to our nonprofit audience?
Yeah, I mean, the thing, certainly the moment that we're in terms of Q4 is upon us. We're in an election year. Obviously, Giving Tuesday is nearing as well. And it just creates this level of energy that we want to make sure we capitalize on as well. One of the key nuggets that we pulled out of the most recent field guide, which actually showed a downward trend, but just given some of the timing of the data sort of tells us that in Q4, right, it's actually an upward trend as we think about giving in person. So trying to capitalize on some of those moments, coupled with just harnessing the energy that is abound right now and really making those appeals. I think there's a general concern and fear about asking too much, and we certainly need to balance appeals with gratuity and those touch points. But now is the moment to be asking more because, again, people are thinking about the election. Giving Tuesday is coming up, so it's really a great opportunity for fundraisers.
Actually, that's a great point. And Woodrow, I wonder if you could speak on that because I do think that it seems a little counterintuitive that with all of the buzz in the air, I mean, presidential elections in the US, crisis in the Middle East, ongoing war in Ukraine, I think the inclination for a fundraiser might be like, oh, I have to pull back. So talk to me about why that is not actually going to be the most effective strategy.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I will acknowledge that there is a bit of a tension in that when there's a lot of stuff going on in media, that it does bring some sort of tactical challenges. But I think it's what's really important to understand is that when people are worried and concerned about things, when they're feeling passionately, either positively or negatively, responding with generosity is a key way that people demonstrate agency, that they have an opportunity to feel like they can make positive change, actually do something about the things that they care about. And we see that all the time. It's sometimes very straightforward. It's disaster relief. But other times it's a little more nuanced. But the key thing there is that when people are highly engaged in issues, is the time to give them that opportunity to be able to take action. And we see that people are very responsive to that. In fact, we saw in Q2 in the trending was that response rates were steady. People were not less likely to respond to an ask, but they were getting asked less. And that's a real problem.
I wonder if one of you could frame this in the larger context of declining individual donor rates overall, and how are we to understand these statistics that you've pulled out for end of Q4 against the backdrop of overall declining rates of giving?
One of the things we looked at as we launched Giving Pulse was who's getting engaged and invited to be part of the support network and who is not. And it's really clear that a lot of people are just not being invited. They're being left out. They're not being provided the same opportunities. And we were curious. In fact, in our Q1 report, we thought, let's try to quantify this. And so we did an analysis and looked at the people who looked a lot like the responsive givers, but who weren't being asked. We estimate that we would have seen a 7% increase in response rate overall. And that actually is a very substantial change. It means we are leaving a lot of giving on the table by just not engaging all givers more broadly.
Could you put a little bit more meat on that for me? Like, who are the people that are being left out and why?
Well, I think that what we're largely seeing is hyperfixation and over-indexing on large donor stewardship. And this is not the suggestion isn't don't do that. There's a need for that. But what we saw coming out of 2020 was this real risk that we were undermining a broad foundation of givers to focus on just the biggest donors. And we can see from macroeconomic trends going back to before the recession in 2008 that those big donors are more likely to be responsive to economic uncertainty. So we thought this could be a problem. And sure enough, what happened was those big donors started to pull back. And we didn't have the broad base of support because we've been over focusing on those big donors. What is really insidious about this is when that happens, it actually it results in organizations doubling down on that strategy that got us the problem in the first place, because now they're competing for this diminishing resource that they've come to rely on over and above all others. So that becomes the even more of a focus of how we structure our fundraising. We are in a position now with the large donors bringing the money back, and we still have declines in overall participation rate. What is key now is to understand that happened on purpose. Our system is designed to get that outcome. If we don't like that, if we want broader engagement, what is clear from Giving Pulse is go out and engage more people more often. You will get the response. And we see it. It's not just theoretical. We see it during disaster relief, and we see it during Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is the single biggest day for donor acquisition by a huge margin every year. So there's your opportunity to shift this, but it's incumbent on us as an industry to change our approach. So yeah, Giving Tuesday is a great opportunity to do that. We should look at December, and Stephanie can talk about what those sort of strategies can be to make sure that giving season helps to reverse that trend. We should also be doing this more often, and we will see a better result. We don't, Q2 is typically down compared to, particularly compared to Q4, but so is our action. We need to be more active more often.
That's a good point. Stephanie, you said something that I really want to touch on. You said more in person. And I think that increasingly a lot of nonprofits are really relying on digital, send more
Yeah.
emails, send more social
Yes.
media posts. And I'm curious about how you think about in person and what are the things that we could be doing to engage people in person, and particularly at scale, because we know a lot of
Yeah.
nonprofits are under-resourced and understaffed.
Yeah, for sure. And to the point of the timing, right? Q2 in-person giving is down, but we know we're entering into Q4, right? Where it's typically higher and people are just gathering, they're out doing social things, they're spending time together. So it's a great opportunity that even if it is canvassing, right, you can sort of have a small initiative that's actually pretty broad reach. So yes, you're not going to get the level of impressions and engagement that you can get at scale digitally. But when you think about quality engagements and impressions, there's huge opportunity there. So Atlanta Humane Society is a great example that we cited in the latest field guide. And one of the other elements as we think about Q4, it's also the moment where folks are much more willing to become sustainers and give monthly. So the opportunity to have, whether it's pop-up events and, even obviously the Salvation Army bell ringing, right, to the extent some organizations can work towards that, it's great. But even if you don't have that platform in terms of in-person giving, canvassing, pop-ups, other smaller events to take advantage of folks, again, coming together and gathering. But then also when you're engaging, making the ask a monthly ask as opposed to a one-time ask, which is what Atlanta Humane Society did really well and has been a really successful initiative for them.
So, Woodrow, you mentioned that Giving Tuesday is the world's largest donor acquisition event. Have you done any analysis about donor retention? Because I harp on this all the time. I think as a sector, we're not great at retaining donors. And so if you do this big push, put in a lot of effort and time and energy and money into getting the donors, but you're losing them out the back door, that's obviously not going to be helpful. So just curious if you've done any analysis on that.
Yeah, we have, as well as a number of our platform partners have done their own analyses as well. And the short story is, not only is it the biggest day for donor acquisition, those donors tend to have a higher retention rate and a higher lifetime value. So there is real value in getting these broad grassroots. I mean, there's a lot of, it's not, and it's we're not really trading money. There's a lot of money that comes in on Giving Tuesday from these small grassroots donors. The average donation is nice and small. This is something I was talking to a number of organizations about just this week, about how we should be trying to get our average donation down, not up. Which may be a whole other conversation, but we do see that
As
we
a
see this
major
big
gift
influx.
fundraiser, I was squeeging inside. I was like, what are you
Yeah,
saying, Woodrow?
there are some caveats to that statement for sure. But I mean, on Giving Tuesday, what we see is these big donor acquisition opportunity. Donors they're retained at a higher level. They're more likely to give it again by the end of the year. They're more likely to be monthly givers, and they tend to have a higher lifetime value. So it really does pay to take the opportunities for. We saw the same thing in 2020. People responding to the poly crisis, also responding to things like racial justice, not just COVID related. That 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 was the only year we've had in recent history where the number of donors in the system increased overall, and those donors retained at an unprecedented level the following year. So we get to have our cake and eat it too. These big, broad grassroots engagements that are driven by moments, they actually do tend to retain those donors better.
It's interesting, and I wonder if you could touch on this, which is I think we tend to think in binaries, like you're either going to be a donor or you're going to be a volunteer. And the truth is that these two things are often connected. I'll use myself as a data point of one. Yesterday, I made yet another political donation at the same time that I signed up for a letter writing campaign. And so I think, how might we as nonprofit fundraisers out here think about the the Venn diagrams, if you will, of people who are volunteers, donors, supporters, newsletter subscribers, etc.
I mean, you can get right in the Giving Pulse report, you can literally look at the Venn diagrams. Um, it is very rare for someone only to give in one way. Generally speaking, the vast majority of people are giving not just their money, but also in other ways. In fact, in most communities, for most people, giving things is the most common behavior. But I think what's even more critical is that only doing one thing is really, really exceedingly rare. We saw this on Giving Tuesday from the early days. Like only donating money was the least common behavior. The vast majority of donors are also doing something else. If you want to retain a donor, giving them volunteer opportunities is the best way to retain that donor. And then thinking sort of more broadly, and again, I think the field guide and Stephanie can kind of provide what do you do tactically about this, but thinking broadly and strategically, what does this say to us? It means that when we're engaging people, we should not be thinking about ourselves as a kind of intrusive solicitation, but rather we are talking to somebody who's already generous in many ways, making change in their community, and we're giving them another opportunity to do that. And we should be thinking about how if they're looking at a diverse and prolific giving experience, how can we provide that as an organization so that we're not always just one pathway and it's donation?
Yeah. And Stephanie, I have a tactical question for you, but I think the point should be underscored, which is I think as fundraisers, we should not be thinking about this transaction. We should be thinking about a donor experience. Stephanie, let's jump over to you. Let's talk tactically. So, Giving Tuesday,
Yeah.
I'll be very frank. I've said it publicly. I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with Giving Tuesday. On the one hand, I think it's a wonderful message. I love that it inspires people to give. And on the other hand, it feels like it becomes another thing to do on a list of things to do. And I think there's so much pressure built up around this one day. And I'll just
Hmm.
say for myself personally, like that is a day I know I'm going to get like 500 emails from
Yeah.
organizations I may or may not know asking me for money. So,
Yeah.
Stephanie, question for you. How can we cut through the noise and make sure that we are actually reaching our donors in a meaningful way on Giving Tuesday?
Yeah, I think it's about the topic we've just been hitting on, right, as it relates to the experience and just the relevance, right? Whether you're a donor or a volunteer, or, the reason folks gave during the pandemic was because something resonated with them with what was happening in that moment in time. So I think as fundraisers, it seems difficult to be more personalized in our communications and have sort of dynamic decisioning and content. But with technology, it's actually a lot easier than it used to be. So it's a little bit of getting out of the one size fits all, sort of Giving Tuesday pushes and starting to think about how do we use dynamic components in an email, or, dynamic creative optimization and paid social and other right formats to make sure that the message when it hits is not only timely because it's Giving Tuesday and this is our moment, but it also just feels relevant to me and how I want to give and engage and potentially volunteer. So,
Well, I think the other point too, Stephanie, which I'm hearing sort of underneath it all, is that the lead up or the Giving Tuesday is actually not the main event. Like there's a lead up to it, and you should be warming up your list. You should
yeah,
be, delivering value to people prior to this Giving Tuesday
yeah,
solicitation. And so I think it would be a mistake to think of Giving Tuesday as the event
right,
itself. That in
yeah,
fact, it's almost like
season,
a gala, right? It's like, okay,
yeah,
the gala
yeah,
is the big ta-da moment, but
yeah,
actually the work happened way before.
yeah,
And we are seeing that Giving Tuesday, in terms of donation behavior, is spreading out, and I think that has to do with organizations recognizing that talking about Giving Tuesday should happen like 5 weeks out and continue afterward. And that the it is very helpful to have this sort of resonant and pull this moment to galvanize around, but that really can mean and should mean an engagement that starts earlier, giving people lots of on ramps into that and celebrating and making it celebratory. The other thing is that the data show, I think, frankly, contrary to what a lot of particularly smaller organizations expect, that the noise actually helps. We think about, oh, I get all these emails. Yes, in part because we're in the sector and we're just more likely to be engaged with more organizations and more likely to have our name on their list. But still, those emails are still going to be dwarfed by the commercial solicitations that we get over that period. This is more the norm in every other industry. And we tend to look at it from our own perspective and not think about the fact that, frankly, most communications that people see in the media, in fact, is just sort of going in one ear and out the other. And commercial marketers know that that means they have to be much more present more often in more channels. And the nonprofit kind of inclination to go, well, I better talk less is really the opposite of what we need to do. And I think one of the most compelling indicators there is smaller organizations on Giving Tuesday punch way above their weight. They get 3 to 5 times the market share that they get annually. And that really, I think, speaks to the fact that we know from survey results that people participate in Giving Tuesday to be part of a bigger group of people doing good and still want to participate in a way that feels very personal to them. And it's really, really the perfect opportunity for small and mid-sized community-based organizations to engage. And the noise, yes, I know you see, ads from big organizations on YouTube, and you think, how could I ever compete with that? But in fact, what's happening is they're raising the volume of generosity and they're softening the ground. And that's why I think what we see is you don't actually need a lot of resources to do really well on Giving Tuesday because we've hyped up giving and those big organizations have helped you do it.
Yeah, I love thinking about it that way. One thing I'm thinking about as well is, sorry, I had a question and totally just flew out of my brain. It was to do with first-time donor retention. So statistically, we know that I think it was first-time donors are retained at like 20%. And Woodrow, your point was that these Giving Tuesday donors actually tend to stick around longer. Why is that?
Great question, Ria. I think part of the answer is surely that organizations that are leveraging Giving Tuesday the best are thinking about their engagement with donors differently. And so we provided this opportunity to engage. There is urgency because you want to be part of the fun. And also it's celebratory. And it's not like compared to the rest of the year, it tends to be a little bit broader in terms of the messages and the experimentation that organizations are doing. And so because those really are best practices in engaging lots of people, just the fact that organizations are showing up on this day and using that practice that isn't typical is resulting in a better engagement and frankly, probably showing organizations that how to do that on an ongoing basis. The other part of it is that Giving Tuesday skews toward recurring giving more than other times of the year. And I think that's obviously part of that. We know that those recurring gifts, when they're pledged, that those donors are going to retain at a higher level and have a higher lifetime value. Certainly doesn't explain all of it. But Neon One, for example, their recurring giving report's really, really useful. Deep dive into recurring in their database. And they saw 12% of all their recurring gifts were started on Giving Tuesday. So I think that's part of it. Good product market fit for recurring and more people trying it, and then just a more effective and broader engagement results in a better connection to your donors.
So one more question about sort of the big picture, and then I'd love to get into specific examples. So the big picture question I have is I'm wondering if there was analysis done around age demographics and other demographics? Like, are younger people more likely to give on Giving Tuesday versus older people? Is it more digital versus, I mean, Stephanie, you spoke to the in-person. So I'm just wondering tactically, as a nonprofit, if I'm thinking about how I'm going to deploy my limited resources to grab the largest chunk of market share, how should I be thinking about that?
Yeah,
Really, the
Woodrow,
question is, should I be going on
do you
TikTok?
want to speak to the age trend and I can talk tactics?
Yeah, I mean, so on Giving Tuesday, we do see a trend toward younger adults under 40. The in every age cohort, we see that when we look at the US, the majority of people who are aware of Giving Tuesday participate in some way. And that's true across all age groups. It does tend to skew a little more digital than other times of the year. It does have a higher awareness typically in these younger adult demographics than in older demographics. And as a result of that higher, and then also a slightly higher all those again, it's healthy across cohorts, but in that young adult demographic, it's particularly engaging. So it does work particularly well in those younger groups. Interestingly, though, on years where we've seen like a lot of TV coverage, that drives up awareness in the older generations, and most of them respond, most of them with their wallets, and it drives up that awareness in that group a little bit and actually drives a lot of dollars because their average gift tends to be a little bit higher. So it's certainly not it's only for the kids situation. But it does appear to be, it's especially for the kids situation, kids being under 40. And I do think that's great because we don't have enough of that, right? On an annualized basis with a hyper focus on large donor stewardship, that's not the sweet spot for that engagement. And so this is an opportunity to build a base of support that in younger people who have a lot more potential trajectory for our organizations.
I actually have one more question before we get to the nitty-gritty, because I'm just thinking about your average small grassroots nonprofit. And I think often there is this desire to look at small dollar donations just from a philosophical perspective. But I think from an ROI perspective, it feels less efficient than focusing on the few very big donors. And so I guess, how can we balance that tension, right? Because if we're focusing on small dollar donors, and frankly, most nonprofits don't have the marketing chops or the marketing capacity to do a big enough push to get enough small dollar donors in to make up a significant portion of their budget. I hear what you're saying, Woodrow, which is a long-term strategy to build a donor base. But in the short term, when I have bills to pay, how do I balance out my time and energy and resources?
Woodrow, you want me to take that one?
Yeah, go for it.
Or start off, and I actually, as you were posing the question, kind of came full circle to the metric conversation a little bit ago, where we talked about average gift being something we should be a little bit wary of, right? So, I'm always pushing us to be mindful of annualized giving, right, and thinking about starting to pivot away from average gift metrics, because I do think the stronger your sustainer program and your monthly giving programs become, even if those are small gifts, right, it can tend to skew those metrics. And then those major donors, right, sort of thinking about some of those gifts as serving as a match, which we know is a really compelling reason to get more, sort of broad audiences to give, and some of those smaller dollar gifts on Giving Tuesday is really compelling opportunity to kind of continue to, especially for those smaller grassroots organizations, right, to really expand their donor pools and the amount of folks who are donating in that moment. But again, it's just about, whether it's a sustained monthly gift and being mindful of how you think about your metrics to value that, but then also the continued relevance of engaging with them if they do make that first small gift on Giving Tuesday, right, to make sure that you're in front of them with discussion about the mission, how their gift is being used, that it feels local. And I mean, that's one of the benefits of the small grassroots organizations. They are local and in your community. And certainly Woodrow can speak better to this. The data tell us that is very compelling for people, right, and their tendencies to want to give in their local community. So just a lot of opportunity to kind of continue into that transition moment to get them to become more frequent donors. And again, just getting back to the beginning of the conversation about don't be afraid, right, to sort of make those appeals, again, sort of in concert with remembering to be thankful as well. But I think there's general hesitance to ask, right, a lot, but there's certainly a core set of donors for whom we're under appealing, if that makes sense.
And I would add to that that um, the like a grassroots engagement as a community organization is, I think it's going to convert much faster than we have than we realize that we have compelling stories. We saw um, mid-sized arts organizations one year got 20% of their revenue, their annual revenue, on Giving Tuesday. It there's an opportunity there that is, I think, undervalued. And this is right, that concern is kind of how we got this problem to begin with. And we need to change it if we're going to have a resilient sector and resilient organizations. So we're going to need to find a way to do more. I think there's a couple of ways that you can sort of balance the resource issue that you raise, which is, absolutely valid. Our organizations are, it's not like we have a bunch of risk capital lying around. One is more focus on recurring. That is a great way to ensure that you're getting really high value from those smaller donors, that you're giving them that opportunity to be in partnership with you. And it frees your organization to get out of a transactional engagement, right? Because now you're talking to a supporter about the things that you do, the other ways that they can get involved, the good that they're doing, and not having to always think about how am I going to convert them again and again and again and again. And then the other thing I think is that we need to de-silo our organizations. There's a tendency to kind of think about we have marketing Marcom that kind of talks about the organization, decides what it looks like. We have community engagement, and that's a program function. And then we have development, and they go after people with a lot of money. And that's not very efficient. I think that it's, if we think about it instead, that we have stories to tell about our organization to a broad group of people, and we need some differentiation of kind of what we say to whom. But if we integrate these functions better, I think what we get is kind of better return. We get more value per unit of storytelling if we think about this as an integrated team as opposed to siloed.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And Stephanie, can I jump over to you? I'd love for you to give us some specific examples that you've seen of success stories, because I know there's a lot of folks out here listening like, okay, great, I'm sold. What now? What does that look like? How do I implement?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, we talked a little bit about, sort of the Atlanta Humane Society and how you combine, again, sort of these trends that we're seeing that matter for Q4 in terms of capitalize on in person, right? And there's some small, easy ways to mobilize there, right? In terms of, right, we talked about the intersection of volunteers and donors, right? Get some folks out, volunteer who want to canvas, and then make that ask monthly, a monthly ask, right? In terms of engaging them to become sustainers. I'm trying to think of other ones just off the top of my head. I think the recent field guide also mentioned Copper Shores Community Health Foundation. It just, again, the moment of being in person, sort of the opportunity to sort of give in a sustained way, giving folks options for how to give, right? And just being, sometimes we kind of forget, oh, this is a mail appeal. They're going to want to give through the mail, but understanding that people may want to sort of from an outbound perspective, want to be communicated through one channel, but their sort of donation may come through another, and giving them sort of flexibility and options there. And really critical for that is making sure we can tie things back, right? And that we understand sort of the things that we're doing that are driving those donations. And then I hit on it before, but it's certainly worth mentioning again, because sometimes we can spin these things up quickly and deploy some digital activations, which is to say, try to secure those matches for Q4. Regardless of the scale of your organization, it's an incredibly compelling thing that we see sort of like multiplication effects, right, of impact when those Giving Tuesday offers are going out with a match. So definitely a big priority.
And one thing you said, Stephanie, that I want to underscore, and Woodrow, you touched on it as well, which is I think there's this tendency in the nonprofit world to think of money and fundraising as dirty. But the truth is we're all in fundraising. We're all in sales. We're all in marketing. And so when we are doing those in-person things that may look like a program initiative, but actually might be a donor acquisition opportunity, how are we measuring that? How are we looking at the different ways in which we can bring people into the pipeline? And I think it would be a missed opportunity if we didn't think about the ways that things could be multi-purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just even that like connectivity between are your major gift officers out there securing the match for the direct response, right? Sort of campaigns and things like that. So 1,000% agree with Woodrow's point, the opportunity to kind of create some collaboration there and better connectivity and sort of fluidity across those programs is a huge opportunity.
Okay, last question for me as we round into home. Putting on your prognostication hats, what do you see both from the data and what you think the future might hold for both Giving Tuesday, but more broadly, philanthropy and generosity overall?
Well,
if you had a crystal ball, Woodrow.
yeah, if I had a crystal ball, well, I get this question a lot. I think what my non-answer to that question, Ria, is we're going to get what we generate. There's untapped opportunity. People are generous and they're ready and willing to give. They're giving in their communities all the time, and they want an opportunity to do so. So the result we get, whether it's increased participation, more money, better engagement with nonprofits, higher trust, is going to all be about whether we show up as an industry, invite all people, and give them those opportunities. And if we don't, then the result is not going to be good. But if we do, there is abundance available.
Yeah.
Stephanie, last thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say I had a leader who would say this all the time. What got us here won't get us there. So when I think about the future of fundraising and philanthropy and generosity, I think for fundraisers to be open to, constantly challenging this is how we've always done it. This is what we know works, right? Because we do know, constituent behavior is changing and evolving. And so we've got to continue to keep pace with that. And then certainly a lot of opportunity if we do so.
Okay, I do have one last question. I totally lied. What metrics should we be thinking about or data points should we be looking at as we head into Giving Tuesday? So I know that you mentioned that sort of recurring giving, new donor acquisition, anything else that we should be thinking about to measure?
There's almost so many, right? I always struggle to like, how do we keep the main thing the main thing? But Woodrow, do you have a sort of one of one that's not in that list you would include?
Well, I mean, if we're thinking about, what to think about, like what we should be paying attention to in the lead up to Giving Tuesday, I think what we should be thinking about is what do my stakeholders look like, and how can I engage them in lots of ways and leading up to that moment. I think one of the things that is that suppresses potential result is kind of thinking is and you kind of touched on this earlier, Ria. It's like on Giving Tuesday, I suddenly shift my large donor stewardship to I'm going to talk to all the people all the time, right? We need a broad base of engaged supporters and stakeholders in the lead up to that in order to leverage it. So I'd be thinking now about how do I tell my story to more people and start giving them different inroads into my mission, including donation, but definitely not exclusively donation. And I'd be tracking, what does my engagement look like? What do those people look like? What do they care about? How else are they behaving? What what materials and stories are they responding to inform a strategy? And then look at, okay, who gave and what channel did they use? So I make sure I'm talking to them again before the end of the year in a way that has been proven to be resonant because they showed up and made a donation on the day. And that's how I can ensure I continue that engagement with them before the end of the year. And then typical, yes, annualized retention rates are a useful thing to track. You should know what your retention rate is. Do I think we should be examining that metric a little bit more? New donor retention versus others, should we look at a cycle that is not just annual? Yes, but also there are some basics that are just worth tracking that if, that metric goes up, it's probably a good sign.
Yeah, it'd be such a fascinating study to think about, leading metrics as opposed to lagging metrics.
Yeah.
I don't know if the data nerds can handle this, but if you ever do that, I'd love to see it. And
Yeah.
I would be remiss, I'm going to name check Jess Campbell here. Clean your lists before Giving Tuesday, people.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And then again.
And then again.
Yes,
exactly.
don't forget to do it outside of Giving Tuesday.
Yeah, no one likes a dirty list.
Amen.
All right. Thank you both so much to you. So if you're listening to this, go forth and conquer Giving Tuesday. We'll make sure that the report is in the show notes along with both of your LinkedIn profiles. So Stephanie, Woodrow, thanks so much for all the work and the inspiration to conquer Giving Tuesday.
Thanks, Rhea.
Thank you.
See you guys.